Imagine this. You're minding your own business, running a farm that's been in your family for generations, when suddenly a woman with the world's most condescending smirk hands you a list of violations for rules that don't even apply to you. You laugh it off, thinking it's just some harmless HOA nonsense. But she isn't joking. Days later, you find out she's called the cops on your farm, demanding they enforce community regulations. And that's when karma strikes, because the officer who shows up is my brother, the sheriff. Oh, but trust me, it doesn't stop there. Now, let's rewind to how this mess even started. I've lived on my family's farm for years. It's not just land. It's my home, my livelihood, and honestly, my peace of mind. I grow fresh produce, keep some chickens, and even have a couple of goats, one of whom, by the way, is named Duke and has an unholy talent for screaming like a banshee at sunrise. It's a simple life, and I love it. A few years ago, a fancy, HOA-controlled neighborhood popped up about a mile down the road. At first, I didn't think much of it. People like their cookie-cutter houses and manicured lawns. That's their business. I never imagined they'd try to extend their dictatorship onto my farm. But then came Karen. Oh, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. If you've ever met someone who acts like their clipboard gives them supreme legal authority, you know exactly what kind of person she is. I hadn't had much interaction with her before, but that changed one bright Monday morning when she showed up at my front gate holding a thick stack of papers. She had that look, the one where someone thinks they're about to ruin your whole day with a single signature. "Hello," she said, her voice dripping with artificial politeness. "Are you the property owner?" "Yep," I said, crossing my arms. "Can I help you with something?" Karen smiled like a predator spotting an easy meal. "I'm the president of the Willow Creek HOA, and I'm here to discuss your non-compliance with community regulations." Now, two things immediately stood out to me. Willow Creek is a gated neighborhood that has nothing to do with my farm. I never signed any HOA agreement because, again, I don't live there. I raised an eyebrow. "That's nice, but I'm not in your HOA." She blinked like I had just spoken ancient Greek. "Well," she said, flipping through her papers, "technically, all properties within a 1-mile radius must follow HOA guidelines. It's in our bylaws." I almost laughed out loud. "Lady, your bylaws don't apply to me. This is private farmland. I've owned it for years." Karen's smile faltered for half a second, but she recovered quickly. "Regardless, we have received multiple complaints about your farm disturbing the community. The roosters are too loud in the mornings, and your barn is an unauthorized structure under HOA aesthetic guidelines." I had to take a deep breath. Okay, first, I don't answer to your HOA. Second, farms have roosters. That's kind of their whole thing. Third, this barn was built before your HOA even existed. Karen pursed her lips. "That doesn't change the fact that we have rules, and the neighborhood has expectations. I'm formally requesting that you remove non-HOA approved structures and keep all animals indoors between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. to respect the community's right to peace." Now, I actually did laugh. "Oh, that's cute." "No." Her expression went cold. "I strongly advise you to take this seriously. If you don't comply, there will be fines and legal consequences." That was the moment I knew Karen was going to be a problem. See, I hate bullies, and nothing gets under my skin more than some power-hungry busybody trying to control something that isn't theirs. I took her stack of papers and ripped them in half right in front of her. "Lady, let me spell this out. I am not in your HOA. You have zero authority over me, my land, or my animals. Now get off my property." Her face turned an impressive shade of red. "Fine," she snapped. "Have it your way. But don't say I didn't warn you." And with that, she stormed back to her car and sped off. I figured that was the end of it. Oh, I was so wrong. Over the next few days, weird things started happening. First, I found official violation notices zip-tied to my fence. Each one had some nonsense about unauthorized structures and failure to comply. Then, I caught a tow truck trying to hook up to my old farm truck, which was parked on my private driveway. When I confronted the driver, he mumbled something about HOA towing rules before speeding off. And then, one morning, I woke up to find that someone had cut my fence. My goats were running loose near the road, and I had to chase them down before they got hit by a car. That was when I knew Karen wasn't just being annoying. She was actively messing with my farm. I installed security cameras because something shady was happening. And then, a few days later, the final straw. I was out fixing my fence when I saw Karen standing on the side of the road on her phone. She was watching my barn like a vulture waiting for roadkill. I didn't think much of it until, 20 minutes later, police cars pulled up my driveway. A smug grin spread across Karen's face as she crossed her arms, watching. She had actually called the cops on me. I walked up as the officer stepped out of his patrol car. And that's when Karen's smugness evaporated in real time, because the cop that stepped out was my brother, the sheriff. And that was when the real fun began. The moment Karen saw my brother step out of the sheriff's vehicle, her entire demeanor shifted. Just minutes earlier, she had been standing there, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with satisfaction like she had already won. But as soon as she recognized Sheriff Jake, her expression cracked. See, Jake isn't just my older brother. He's a no-nonsense lawman who doesn't tolerate entitled people trying to weaponize the law for personal vendettas. And the fact that Karen called the cops on my farm, thinking she had the upper hand? Oh, this was about to be fun. Karen, clearly flustered, took a step forward and forced a sweet, innocent smile. "Oh, Sheriff Jake, I had no idea you'd be the one responding to my call," she chirped, pretending like this was some happy coincidence. Jake, who saw right through her, just raised an eyebrow. "Karen," he greeted flatly. Then he turned to me. "You want to explain why I'm getting a call about your farm disturbing the peace?" I smirked. "Oh, I'd love to." Before I could even start, Karen jumped in, talking way too fast, clearly trying to control the narrative. "Sheriff, we have received multiple complaints from the Willow Creek HOA regarding his property. His animals are loud at all hours of the day. His barn is an unauthorized structure, and quite frankly, this farm is bringing down the aesthetic value of the community." Jake stared at her for a long, hard second. Then he turned to me. "You live in an HOA now?" "Nope," I said, crossing my arms. "Never signed anything, never agreed to anything, never will." Jake nodded slowly, turning back to Karen. "So, you're trying to enforce HOA rules on land that isn't in your HOA?" Karen blinked rapidly, trying to find a way to spin it. "Well, technically, we have a policy that extends a 1-mile radius beyond the neighborhood." Jake cut her off, pulling out his notepad. "A policy," he repeated, "or a legally enforceable contract?" She swallowed hard. "A policy. And did my brother sign any kind of agreement placing him under your HOA's authority?" Karen's lips pursed so tightly they practically disappeared. "No." Jake snapped his notepad shut. "Then it sounds like you're trespassing and harassing a private citizen." The color drained from Karen's face. Now, a reasonable person might have backed off at this point. A reasonable person would have realized they had lost and cut their losses. But Karen is not a reasonable person. Instead, she tried to double down. "I am not harassing him. I am simply enforcing community standards for the good of our neighborhood," she huffed. "And if he refuses to comply, we will be issuing fines." That made Jake actually laugh. "Fines?" he echoed. "And who exactly do you think is going to enforce those? Because I can tell you right now, it sure as hell isn't going to be me." Karen, now clearly flustered, started rambling. "I will take this matter to the county zoning board. This property is a nuisance. We've already documented violations, and if you refuse to help, Sheriff, I'll be forced to escalate the matter to your superiors." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You mean the county zoning board that already approved this farm's agricultural status? The same one that signed off on every structure here?" "That zoning board." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Jake tilted his head, his voice mockingly curious. "By the way, what violations are you referring to? Because as far as I know, keeping animals on a farm is not a crime." Karen straightened her back, trying to regain control. "The noise. And the fence. His fence violates HOA height restrictions." Jake turned to me. "That true?" I smirked. "I built that fence 3 years before her HOA even existed." Jake chuckled. "Karen, I'm going to be real honest with you. You don't have a case at all." Karen looked absolutely livid. "This isn't over," she hissed before storming off back to her car. But it was far from over. Over the next week, the HOA escalated. First, I found more violation notices, this time mailed to me. Then, I caught someone tampering with my fence again. And the most ridiculous part? An HOA representative showed up at my door with a bill. A bill for HOA fines. "This is your final notice," the guy said, smug as hell. "Failure to pay will result in further action." I took the paper, stared at it for a second, then burst out laughing. "This is hilarious," I said, crumpling it up. "Go ahead, take me to court. I'd love to see how that goes for you." The guy's smirk faltered. "You'll be hearing from us soon," he snapped before stomping away. Oh, I was sure I would. So I did what any sane person would do. I called my lawyer. And as it turned out, I wasn't the only one dealing with the HOA's overreach. Turns out several other homeowners in the neighborhood had also been receiving fraudulent fines. Some had already paid up out of fear, not realizing that Karen and her little HOA council had been making up rules as they went. And now, that was about to bite them in the ass. Because HOA, Karen had just crossed a line she couldn't walk back from, and soon she was about to wish she had never messed with my farm. I thought Karen would back off after my brother, Sheriff Jake, made it painfully clear that she had zero authority over my farm. But no, instead of realizing she had lost, she did what entitled people do best. She escalated. And that's how we ended up with her biggest mistake yet. A few days after the official HOA fine delivery, I noticed Karen hanging around my property again. She wasn't alone this time. She had brought 2 other HOA board members with her, one of whom was holding a clipboard, furiously taking notes while Karen pointed at my barn like she was conducting an official inspection. I grabbed my phone and walked over. Need something? Karen barely glanced at me. We are documenting additional violations. I snorted. Violations of rules that don't apply to me. Karen turned, wearing her signature smug grin. Oh, we'll see about that. Then she took out her phone and, right in front of me, called the cops. She put it on speaker. Yes, hello? I need to report a serious zoning violation on a property that is disturbing the peace, she said, glancing at me with absolute arrogance. There are unauthorized structures, and honestly, I'm concerned about the safety of the neighborhood. I just stared at her. This woman was straight up fabricating nonsense. Oh, and there may be aggressive livestock on the premises, she added dramatically. That's when Duke, my goat, let out a loud, ungodly scream from the barn. Karen recoiled like she had just heard a murder. The cop on the line asked for my address, and she read it off with the confidence of someone who thought they were about to win. I sighed. All right, Karen, you want the cops? Let's do this. I went inside, grabbed a beer, and sat on my porch, waiting. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up, and the second Jake stepped out. Karen's smug face shattered. You again? She shrieked. Jake, looking absolutely done with this woman, crossed his arms. Got a call about a serious zoning violation. He turned to me. Is this about your barn again? I took a sip of my beer. Yep. Jake sighed, turned back to Karen, and gave her a look that said, Are you seriously this dumb? Karen, realizing she had made a horrible mistake, started backpedaling immediately. Oh, Sheriff Jake, I didn't realize. You see, I was just trying to keep the community safe, she stammered. This farm is a growing concern, and Jake held up a hand. Stop. Just stop. Karen's mouth snapped shut. Jake looked at me. You pressing charges for harassment yet? Karen gasped. Not yet, I said casually, but I'm getting real close. Jake sighed and rubbed his temples. Karen, let me make something very clear. You have no legal jurisdiction over this property. But no, Jake cut her off. I don't want to hear any but nonsense. You have been repeatedly warned. You are not in charge of this land. Your HOA does not own him. And now you're wasting police resources over a farm that has been here since before you even moved in. Karen's face turned beet red. One of the HOA board members, the guy with the clipboard, tried to speak up. Sheriff, we have evidence that this property is violating zoning regulations. Jake turned to him and smirked. Oh, you mean the zoning board that I already checked with? The one that approved every structure on this land? Clipboard guy froze. Jake leaned in. Let me tell you what I see here. I see a group of people fabricating complaints and attempting to extort a private citizen. Karen stiffened. That is a very serious accusation. Jake's smirk didn't falter. Good thing I have a very serious amount of evidence. Karen blanched. And that's when Jake decided to drive the nail into the coffin. You know what? I think I'll be launching an investigation into your HOA. Karen visibly panicked. That's completely unnecessary. Oh no, Jake said, grinning now. See, we've already gotten multiple complaints from homeowners about fraudulent fines and extortion attempts. And now you're on record trying to use police resources for a personal vendetta. Karen was sweating. I was just trying to do what's best for the community. Jake pulled out his notepad. Tell me, Karen, how much fine money has your HOA collected in the past year? Karen stammered. That's private HOA business. Jake chuckled. Not anymore. Clipboard guy gulped. Oh, and one more thing, Jake added. Since you called in a false police report, you might be looking at a hefty fine yourself. Karen lost it. This is harassment. You can't do this to me. Jake scribbled something down in his notepad. Karen, I want you to listen very carefully. If you or your HOA step foot on this property again, I will personally make sure you're charged with trespassing and harassment. Do you understand? Karen's hands were shaking with rage. This isn't over, she hissed. You'll regret this. Jake just smirked. I doubt that. Karen stormed back to her car, slamming the door so hard it rattled. Clipboard guy scurried after her. Jake turned to me and grinned. Well, that was fun. I clinked my beer against his badge. Thanks for stopping by. Jake chuckled. You know this isn't over, right? Oh, I know. Because Karen, she wasn't just going to give up. And that was about to lead to her biggest downfall yet. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that after Jake shut Karen down, she finally realized she had lost and went on with her life. But Karen wasn't the kind of person who could accept defeat gracefully. Nope, she had to go nuclear. And that was the biggest mistake of her life. The HOA's final desperate move? 2 days after Jake threatened an investigation, I got a certified letter in the mail from the HOA's legal team. I laughed the moment I saw the letterhead. Oh, this is going to be good. I opened it up, and sure enough, it was a formal cease and desist order. The letter claimed I was violating HOA regulations. My farm was a public nuisance that lowered neighborhood property values. If I didn't remove my barn, reduce noise levels, and comply with aesthetic regulations, they would take legal action. It even threatened a lawsuit for damages incurred by my refusal to follow community standards. Now, if I were anyone else, I might have been intimidated. But I wasn't just anyone. I had 2 aces up my sleeve. I had a damn good lawyer, and the sheriff, my brother, was already looking into them. So I did the only logical thing. I called my lawyer. My lawyer's reaction? I met up with my attorney, Dave, who had been handling our family's property affairs for years. Dave took one look at the letter, then burst out laughing. Are these people stupid? He asked between chuckles. Apparently, I said, grinning. Dave shook his head, flipping through the pages. Not only is this completely baseless, but they actually admitted in writing that they're trying to enforce HOA rules on land that isn't part of their HOA. So what's our move? I asked. Dave smirked. Oh, we're going to bury them. The counterattack? Dave fired back immediately. Within 24 hours, he sent a formal response that absolutely torched their argument. He pointed out that my property predates the HOA and is not bound by their rules. He highlighted multiple instances of harassment, trespassing, and fraud. He warned them that if they pursued legal action, we would countersue for damages. Then, he copied the county zoning board and the sheriff's office on the letter. The HOA's internal panic? Apparently, that letter sent the entire HOA into a tailspin because just 2 days later, Jake called me. You're going to love this, he said, amusement in his voice. Oh, I said, sipping my coffee. Karen and the HOA just had a full-on meltdown at the county office, he said. Turns out when your lawyer called their bluff, they actually tried to push a zoning complaint against you. I raised an eyebrow. And how did that go for them? Jake laughed. Let's just say the zoning board wasn't too happy about getting dragged into a petty HOA feud. They shut them down instantly, told them your farm was legally zoned and fully compliant. And Karen? I asked, already grinning. Oh, she lost it. She actually demanded they reconsider their policies because your barn is an eyesore and hurting community standards. I nearly spit out my coffee, laughing. You're kidding. Nope, Jake said. The zoning commissioner basically told her to sit down and shut up. But wait, it gets worse for Karen. At this point, Karen was cornered. The legal threat had backfired. The county told her to kick rocks, and now Jake's investigation into the HOA was heating up. See, Jake wasn't bluffing when he mentioned an investigation. And the more he and his team dug, the uglier things got for Karen and her little HOA empire. The fraud exposed? Turns out Karen had been doing more than harassing me. She had been illegally fining homeowners for violations that didn't exist, pocketing administrative fees that had no legal basis, and altering HOA documents to make it seem like the rules applied to more properties than they actually did. She wasn't just power tripping. She was committing fraud. And when Jake's office started talking to other homeowners in the neighborhood, more people came forward with horror stories about Karen's shady dealings. Homeowners had paid thousands in fines that weren't legally enforceable. Some had been threatened with foreclosure if they didn't comply. And Karen? She was the one orchestrating all of it. The final blow? Lawsuits incoming. At this point, it was game over. Multiple homeowners, including me, filed official complaints against the HOA. The county stepped in, investigations began, and Karen? She was facing multiple lawsuits. Dave, my lawyer, was having the time of his life watching it all unfold. This is going to be the easiest lawsuit I've ever won, he told me. The HOA board members started turning on each other. Suddenly, Karen wasn't so smug anymore. And the best part? The HOA itself was in danger of being dissolved. Karen's world crumbles. A few weeks later, Jake called me again. "Well," he said, "guess who just stepped down as HOA president?" "No way," I said. "Oh yeah," Jake confirmed. Karen resigned, citing personal reasons, which in HOA terms means I got caught. Even better, the HOA was forced to return money to homeowners who had been fraudulently fined. Karen had tried to take me down. Instead, she lost everything. The sweet aftermath? A month later, I threw a big barbecue on my farm. Jake came over, along with a bunch of homeowners who had been screwed over by the HOA. We ate good food, laughed about Karen's downfall, and celebrated the end of her reign of terror. Jake raised his beer. To the farm that outlived the HOA. To the farm, everyone cheered. And Karen? Well, she was about to get one final taste of karma, because she hadn't hit rock bottom yet, and soon, she was going to wish she had never messed with me at all. If Karen thought resigning from the HOA would save her, she was dead wrong. Because while she might have stepped down, the damage was already done. And the deeper people dug, the uglier it got. Turns out Karen wasn't just a power-hungry control freak. She was a full-blown fraudster. And now, she was about to be exposed in the most spectacular way possible. The HOA's financial scandal? A few weeks after Karen resigned in disgrace, I got a call from Dave, my lawyer. "You're going to love this," he said, barely containing his amusement. Oh, I leaned back in my chair. What now? Well, remember how we suspected Karen was illegally fining homeowners and pocketing money? Yeah. Well, Dave said, we were right. And when I say right, I mean it was worse than we imagined. Turns out Karen had been running a full-blown financial scam through the HOA. She had been finding homeowners for made-up violations and keeping the money, diverting HOA funds into a management fee account which was only accessible by her, charging homeowners for mandatory services that didn't exist. And the kicker? She had embezzled over $80,000. $80,000. The HOA board turns on Karen. The second the other HOA board members realized how deep the fraud went, they did what rats always do when the ship starts sinking. They turned on Karen. One by one, they started cooperating with investigators. The treasurer admitted he had been pressured into signing off on suspicious transactions. The secretary provided emails from Karen that explicitly directed her to alter official records. One board member even had a recorded conversation where Karen bragged about how easy it was to scare homeowners into paying up. Homeowners revolt, and the lawsuits begin. The homeowners who had already been furious lost their minds when the news broke. Remember those bogus fines Karen had been handing out? People started demanding their money back. And when the HOA couldn't pay it, they sued. Multiple homeowners filed lawsuits against the HOA, claiming fraudulent financial practices, harassment, and intimidation tactics, failure to provide legally required disclosures. And guess who ended up personally named in several of those lawsuits? Karen. The county steps in. HOA faces collapse. At this point, the county had seen enough. The HOA was now facing a full-scale audit of their finances, legal action from multiple homeowners, an official state inquiry into fraudulent HOA practices. And that's when the remaining board members panicked. Faced with financial ruin, legal consequences, and public humiliation, the board voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. That's right. The HOA that Karen had spent years ruling like a dictator? Gone. Karen's personal fallout. Rock bottom hits hard. With the HOA dismantled, Karen's entire empire crumbled. And oh, it got so much worse for her. She was personally sued by multiple homeowners for harassment and fraud. She was forced to pay back a massive chunk of the stolen money. She was hit with criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. And to make things even sweeter, Karen had to sell her house to cover the legal fees. The same house where she had ruled over her little kingdom for years. And guess who bought it? One of the homeowners she had screwed over. That's right. Karen's house was bought by a guy she had fined relentlessly for things like incorrect mailbox color and weeds being too tall. And what did he do with the house? He turned it into a short-term rental. And the listing? It advertised the home as, "Stay in the former home of the worst HOA president in history." Absolutely legendary. The final nail in the coffin? A few months later, I was sitting on my porch when Jake pulled up. He stepped out of his patrol car, grabbed a beer from my cooler, and popped down next to me. "Well," he said, smirking, "Karen's got one last problem." "Oh, I asked, sipping my drink. What now? Jake chuckled. She's trying to fight the lawsuits, but her lawyers just quit on her. Apparently, she refused to pay them. I burst out laughing. You're telling me the woman who ran an entire HOA like a dictatorship is now broke and lawyerless? Jake grinned, and renting an apartment across from a very loud dog park. I leaned back in my chair, stretching out. You know, I don't think I've ever heard a sweeter ending. Jake raised his beer. To justice. I clinked my bottle against his. To karma. And just like that, the nightmare of HOA Karen was finally over. But the legend? That was just getting started. Karen's reign of terror was officially over. The HOA was dismantled, the homeowners got their money back, and Karen? She was in deep, deep trouble. But as it turns out, rock bottom has a basement. Because while Karen was already broke, humiliated, and homeless, she was about to experience the most satisfying karmic beatdown yet. Karen tries to fight back and fails spectacularly. Even after losing her house, position, and reputation, Karen refused to admit defeat. She tried to appeal the lawsuits against her, claiming she had been wrongfully targeted and that everything she had done was in the best interest of the community. Her argument? I was just trying to keep property values high. The judge took one look at the mountain of evidence: fraudulent fines, altered financial records, emails proving she extorted homeowners, and laughed her out of court. Her appeals were denied. And then the judge did something beautiful. He ruled that Karen had to pay even more in damages to the homeowners who had been harassed under her rule. Since she had already sold her house to cover legal fees, she had nothing left. So the court garnished her wages. That's right. For years, Karen had been taking money from innocent homeowners, and now, every paycheck she earned, a chunk of it was going straight back to them. Karen's new life, from HOA tyrant to broke tenant. With no house, no power, and no money, Karen had no choice but to move into a tiny rental apartment. And here's where karma got even sweeter. Her new apartment? Right next to a rowdy college bar, across the street from a 24-hour dog park, with neighbors who threw loud parties every weekend. The same woman who tried to force silence and aesthetic standards on everyone around her was now surrounded by chaos. And the best part? She had no authority over anything. No power. No HOA to bully people with. She was just another regular tenant, subject to the same rules and inconveniences she used to impose on everyone else. The neighborhood celebrates. Meanwhile, back at my farm, things had never been better. Without Karen and her power-hungry HOA, people were actually relaxing for the first time in years. Homeowners painted their houses whatever color they wanted. One guy even put up a 10-foot inflatable dragon on his lawn just because he could. And me? I threw a massive community barbecue to celebrate the official death of the HOA. Neighbors showed up with food, drinks, and stories about all the ridiculous fines Karen had given them over the years. We laughed, we cheered, and someone even brought a giant cake that read, "R.I.P. Karen's HOA." It was beautiful. One final twist, the ultimate payback. A few months later, I got a call from one of my neighbors. "You're going to want to see this," he said, barely containing his laughter. I hopped in my truck and drove over to the house that used to belong to Karen. The new owner, the guy Karen had fined over and over for non-compliant garden gnomes, had done something brilliant. He had turned her former home into an Airbnb. And the listing? It advertised the house as, "Stay in the former home of the most notorious HOA Karen in history. Experience the house that once enforced ridiculous rules and see the very spot where she lost it all." It was even themed. The living room had framed printouts of Karen's worst HOA violation notices. The guest book had a section where visitors could write about their worst HOA experiences. And the Wi-Fi password? Norals. I nearly fell over laughing. Karen's house, the one she had micromanaged for years, was now a tourist attraction for people who hated HOAs. Absolutely legendary. Karen's final attempt at revenge. Word got around that Karen found out about the Airbnb and, predictably, she lost her mind. She tried to sue the new homeowner for defamation and emotional distress. But guess what? You can't sue someone for telling the truth. The judge dismissed her case immediately, and Karen? She was left with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. The perfect ending. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset over my peaceful, HOA-free farm, Jake pulled up and sat beside me. He cracked open a beer and smirked. "Guess what I heard today? Oh, this should be good. Karen applied for a job at the county office." I nearly choked on my drink. "You're kidding." "Nope. And you'll love this. She got denied." "Let me guess," I said, grinning. Because of the fraud charges? Jake nodded. Yep. Turns out embezzling money and harassing homeowners doesn't exactly make you a good candidate for a government job. We clinked our bottles together. To karma, I said. To justice, Jake replied. And with that, the HOA nightmare was officially over. Karen had tried to control everything. In the end, she controlled nothing. And I got to live my life free and victorious. Now, if you've ever had to deal with an HOA Karen, drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more insane stories just like this one. Because trust me, there's always another Karen out there just waiting to get what's coming to them. Karen had lost everything. Her HOA empire gone. Her house sold out from under her. Her reputation utterly destroyed. And her attempts at legal revenge laughed out of court. But while her downfall was satisfying, the best part was what came next. Because karma wasn't done with her yet. Karen's final desperate move? A few months after her failed lawsuit against the Airbnb owner, I heard rumors that Karen was planning one last comeback. Apparently, she had been begging some of the former HOA board members to help her rebuild the HOA from the ashes of the old one. That's right. This woman, who had literally destroyed her own life by being a power-hungry control freak, was still trying to form an HOA. Some people just never learn. Luckily, nobody wanted anything to do with her. Most of the former board members had distanced themselves, and the remaining homeowners? They were enjoying their newfound freedom. Karen was a joke to them now, a cautionary tale of what happens when you push your authority too far. And when she tried to pitch her new neighborhood improvement initiative to the county, they rejected her immediately. She was officially powerless. The neighborhood's final victory. Meanwhile, things in my neighborhood had never been better. With the HOA gone, people started doing whatever they wanted with their homes. The guy who had been fined for his mailbox color painted it neon green. The homeowner who was forced to remove garden decorations replaced them with giant inflatable dinosaurs. And me? I threw another massive barbecue just to celebrate the one-year anniversary of Karen's downfall. Neighbors came together, laughing about all the ridiculous fines and rules she had tried to enforce. Someone even made custom t-shirts that said, "R.I.P. HOA. We outlived Karen's reign of terror." And at the center of it all, the legendary Airbnb that had once been Karen's house. People from all over were booking it just for the sheer irony of staying in the place where the worst HOA president in history had lived. And as for Karen, she wasn't invited to the party. The final twist, Karen's life takes one more hit. One day, I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the peacefulness of my farm, when Jake pulled up again. I could tell by the smirk on his face that he had news. I grinned. All right, what happened now? Jake leaned against the railing, taking his time before delivering the final punchline. So, you know Karen's new apartment? Yeah. Well, turns out she got evicted. I nearly fell out of my chair laughing. You're messing with me. Nope, Jake said, shaking his head. She fell behind on rent and got the boot. I whistled. From HOA tyrant to evicted tenant. That's poetic. Jake chuckled. It gets better. Oh, please tell me she had to move somewhere even worse. Oh, she did, he said, grinning. You know that trailer park on the other side of town? I froze. No way. Jake nodded. Yep, Karen, the woman who fined people for not mowing their lawns, now lives in a place with zero zoning laws. I couldn't breathe. This woman, who had spent years terrorizing homeowners over property values and community aesthetics, was now living in a place where people parked broken-down cars on their lawns and had pet chickens running loose. And the absolute best part? Her next-door neighbor was a guy who owned 3 pit bulls and blasted heavy metal music at full volume every night. Poetic justice. The moral of the story? Karen had tried to control everything. The neighborhood, the homeowners, even the local government. And in the end, she controlled nothing. She had gone from ruling over an HOA kingdom to having no home, no money, and no power. And me? I gotta keep my farm, free from her ridiculous rules, living my best life. The lesson here? Don't mess with people who know their rights. Now, if you've ever had to deal with an HOA Karen, I want to hear about it. Drop your craziest HOA horror stories in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Because trust me, there's always another entitled Karen out there. And when they mess around, they find out. See you in the next one.